Good morning, Morai Rabotai, Bruchim Abayim. Hello everyone, we're continuing on Masechet Makkot, and we are on the bottom of Yud Bet Amud Bet, second Mishnah of the Amud, 4 lines up from the bottom of the Bet Amud Bet. This month's learning of the Kihila is sponsored by the Dayan family, Cohen family, Shrei family, the ultimate school for all of their Mishpachot. Amud Yomi today has been sponsored in memory of Esther Bat Tzvi Levi. This is good for Yehuda ben Asher, Ranael Bat Tzipora, Melashem et Kol Mishpachot Livam Letovah Be'ezrat Hashem. Also has been dedicated for the Refuah Shlema of Mordechai, Afshin ben Shoshana Shahnaz, that should have full recovery of Amen. Also, the message that I got, today's learning specifically should be of a 2-month-old baby who has been in the emergency room for the past 2 days. Benaya ben Miriam should have a flash. Concept of Kayotze Bo, a connection would be because the previous Mishnah discussed the fact that if you have a Levi himself in Arei Leviim that mistakenly, accidentally killed somebody, he goes to different Arei Leviim. Even though that he is living in Arei Miklat, he has to get uncomfortable. He has to get uncomfortable as part of the kapara of Arei Miklat, that he has to be machnia himself, he has to be subordinated, he has to bring himself lower. Part of bringing yourself lower is if somebody respects you, say, I don't deserve the respect. Rotzeach hani, right? So says the Mishnah, Rotzeach shegala le'ir miklato. If a Rotzeach goes to Arei Miklat, ve'ratzu anshe ha'ir lechabedo, and people want to respect him, yomar lahem, he shall tell them, Rotzeach ani, I am a Rotzeach, and you should not be respecting me. I have had a horrible accident come through my hands, even though that is accidental. We mentioned before that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is megalgel zchut al yedei zakai ve'chova al yedei chayav. If he was completely righteous, that would not necessarily happen, would not necessarily come through his hand, and therefore he should say Rotzeach ani. Now the Yerushalmi in Sanhedrin learns from this that it's not only by our case over here, by Rotzeach, but Hayabo, says the Yerushalmi, if he has only one Masechta in his hands, if he only has mastered one Masechta, and people respect him as somebody that has mastered 2 Masechtas, people think he is like this Tameh Acham that he may not be, right? He should stand up and say, Rotzeach ani. He should get up and say, I really don't have that much Chokhmat Torah. I only know one Masechta. Even that, barely. There is really a Gemara in Masechet Ba'Metzia, Daf Chaf Gimal. The Gemara there says that not only a case that you don't really know 2 Masechtas, that you have to clarify and say, well, I only know one Masechta, don't respect me as this person that knows the whole Shas. I have a friend, by the way, that he writes very fascinating, breathtaking pieces of Torah, very stimulating and very entertaining. So he writes in the beginning of his Sfarim always, he says, look, you may read through my Sfarim and see hundreds of Marei Mekomot, and said, don't think that I know any of these things. I have a computer, I do research, I've heard different things from different people, I gathered them in my files, I don't remember any of them necessarily, I don't own the Torah that I write, I research. It's a very humble way of saying, basically, the Gemara in Masechet Sanhedrin, that you don't have, in Yerushalmi, they don't have necessarily two Masechtas, you only have one. But the Gemara says in Bava Metzia, we mentioned Chav Gimel, it says, even if you do have the two Masechtas, even if you are a Baki B'Shas, right? This is one of the three things that Talmidei Chachamim usually change from the truth is, if somebody says, did you finish this Masechta? And you did. You know it backwards and forwards, Baal Peh. You say, I hope to be finishing it soon. That's one of the three things that Talmidei Chachamim, in way of humility, they would change from the truth and say something that's not 100% true to lower themselves and to follow the path of humility. So says the Mishnah. Amru lo, if they hear the fact that he is a Rotzeach, and say, you know what? Even with all of that said, we still want to respect you. You are worthy of our respect, says the Mishnah. Then you don't have to necessarily reject it. You don't have to fight them. You accept it. If they will really want to respect you, you let them do it. Now, how do we know that he has to clarify with them that he is a Rotzeach, that they should not necessarily respect him so much? Shenemar, Vezeh Dvar HaRotzeach. When he speaks to people, it has to be Dvar HaRotzeach. It has to be known to people that he is Rotzeach. So he makes sure to say it. B'dibur, he will tell them himself. So it's not that he is camouflaging in a city. He is this like big shot that entered the town now as the scholar in residence. But he has to make sure that people know what has happened with his past. So it says,
you have to daven for the Amud? I assume so, right?
So it's a very good question. There are those who would want to suggest that the Rotzeach B'Shogeg should be pasul le'edut, but the halacha is that no, he's not. He's not a rasha necessarily. He's not. There's a whole sugya of people who become pasul le'edut because of an avera. Siman Lamed Dalet in Choshen Mishpat discusses psulim machamat avera, and this is not one of them. Even though that he has done an avera b'shogeg, right, in that way, but he does not become necessarily a pasul le'edut. So he could, of course, be shach tzibur, could get an aliyah. That's the whole diyun over there, whether or not you could give him an aliyah, standing by the Amud. And the halakha is, it's not necessarily something that renders him invalid for actions of the tzibur, or still be kasher. So says the Mishnah, Ma'alim ayu schar leleviim, divrei Rabbi Yehuda. Now, do you go to Arei Miklat for free, or do you have to pay rent? Or were you staying somewhere? You don't have a house. You don't own one of the real estates in Arei Levim. You're just running there as a Rotzeach. So somebody is giving you a back house, somebody is giving you an apartment. Do you have to pay rent, or do you get it for free? So it says the Mishnah, it's machloket Tanaim. Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Yehuda. Says Rabbi Yehuda, Ma'alim ayu schar leleviim. They would have to pay rent to the Levim. Levim benefited from the real estate in Arei Alviim for acting as Arei Miklat to the Rotzeach B'Shogeg. Rabbi Meir Omer, Lo ayu ma'alim lahen schar. Rabbi Meir says, no, it was free. So how do you learn this from the Psukim?
It's very strange. Presumably he was paying wherever he lived.
No, not necessarily. You don't pay, you own. They have achuzat avotam. Right? Eretz Yisrael was divided to the Shvatim.
So now he can rent out his place where he lives, gets rental disposable income from that.
Not necessarily. His family is there.
He's out of his element.
Not necessarily, but that's not the question. We're not trying to see if he's, what you're bothered with, it's a good question, is like chotev and iskar, right? He sinned and now he's benefiting from it. But that's not what we're discussing here. What we're discussing is, are Leviim are given to the Rotzeach, or are designated as a safe zone, but not given to them. If it's given to them, then you can't charge them, it's theirs. The Torah has given them rights to be there. You can't charge them, right? If it's just made available for them, so then you could charge them. Which is what the discussion that the Gemara is going to have in just a moment. But before that, one last piece in the Mishnah, and that is Chozer lisrara shaya bo divrei Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, la ya chozer lisrara shaya ba. Imagine this person was a Nasi. Imagine if this person was the Rosh Yeshiva. Imagine if this person, or Rosh Yeshiva is not a good example because his whole yeshiva goes with him. He never stops to be a Rosh Yeshiva. But imagine this person was a Av Bedin. Now, somebody else becomes the Av Bedin when he is not there for the 10 years that he was in Ir Miklat until the Kohen Gadol died. So, and after that, he comes back. Does he become Av Bedin? Does he resume and reclaim his srara, his kavod, in the place that he came from, or not? So says the Mishnah, Chozer li srara shayaba. He returns to the srara, to the greatness, to the position that he held before going to Arei Miklat. That's Rabbi Meir, and Rabbi Yehuda says, Lo haya chozer li srara shayaba. He does not go back, and that's the halacha. Rabbi Meir v'chavero halacha k'chavero, right? Rabbi Yehuda is the halacha that he would not go back, he would not return to the srara, to the kavod that he had prior to going to Arei Miklat. Says the Gemara, Amar Rav Kana, machloket b'shesh, the more savar lachem leklita, more savar lachem lechol sorkechem. When we say that they would be exempt from paying rent in Arei Leviim, and that's machloket. Rabbi Yehuda says that they would pay rent, and Rabbi Meir would say that they wouldn't pay rent. Of course, again, halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda, that they would pay rent, that we know. But says the Gemara, that machloket is only with the 6 main Arei Leviim. The 6 main Arei Leviim, the pasuk says about them, lachem, it should be yours. So says the Gemara, one holds savar lachem liklita, that the word lachem means, Hashem says, this is going to be safe zones for the Rotzeach. But not that they're going to have a free ride. They're going to be safe, but they have to rent and pay to the owners. Umor savar, and the other one holds, this is Rabbi Meir, who holds lachem lekol sorkechem. I'm giving it to you for all of your needs, and therefore it's yours. Just like it is the Leviim's to live in, they're not paying rent. It is Klal Yisrael's for their rotzchim v'shogeg, for those who murder accidentally, it's theirs. They have a right to be there. You cannot charge them rent. So it's really a machlokes in how to read the pasuk. But the other 42 cities of Levim, additional to that was added later on, doesn't say about them lachem. So therefore, everybody agrees that the Rotzeach would have to pay rent in the other 42 cities, additional to the 6. Amar Rava says, no. Wait a second. When he says lachem, it means the chol sorkechem. That's not a question even. That's not how to read the machloket Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Yehuda. Lachem always means the sorkechem. So therefore, it's out of question that in the 6 cities, the main major Arei Miklat, you would not pay rent. That's pashut. The machloket Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Meir is only in the other 42 cities of the Leviim. Ela Amar Rava machloket b'arba'im u'shtayim. That's the machloket, and that's the halacha, by the way, right? So if someone asks you, you learn Masechet Makkot, what do you learn? Is the difference between the 6, we have a list we're compiling, right? Should be a test at the end of second parak to see how many differences between Are Leviim, the 6, and the 42 you could come up with. I'm accepting messages after this shiur to see who is going to get the most. Like, but this is one cheating. I'm saying it already. It's going to be, the halacha is like Rava, that on the 6 you would not pay rent according to everybody. Even Rabbi Yehuda would agree to that. But the machloket of Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Meir is, Rabbi Yehuda holds in the other 42 you would pay rent, because the pasuk about them says no lachem over there. It says v'alehem titnu, you should add on them ma'anach lekor sorkechem. Rabbi Meir holds that just like the other ones are for all of your tzrachim and you don't pay rent, af hani nami lekor sorkechem. And Rabbi Yehuda disagrees, and he says hanach leklita. These 42 is only available safe zones for Arei Miklat, but not that they're given to you for your every need, and therefore you would have to pay rent. Aval beshesh, but the 6 main Arei Miklat, divrei hakol ma'alim lahem schar. They would not pay rent at all. Now says the Gemara, Chozer l'srara shaya ba, this that he goes back, or he doesn't go back, to the leadership position that he had, to the greatness that he held before he left, Tanu Rabbanan. We learned the source for this is Veshav el Mishpachto. The pasuk says he would go back to his mishpacha. Now this is not talking about Arei Miklat. Those who know Chumash well, they right away are looking at me that this is talking about an Eved Ivri that goes back home after his period of slavery, of service. He is going back to his mishpacha now, and the pasuk says, "V'shav el mishpachto ve'el achuzat avotav liyashuv." He goes back to his mishpacha, and he goes back to the achuzat avotav, to the inheritance of his fathers. So says the Gemara, "Lemishpachto ushav ve'eno shav." He goes back to his mishpacha, but he does not go back to the greatness that his father would inherit to him. So he does not inherit the greatness, the position of the father. Divrei Rabbi Yehuda, right? This is very much aligned with our machloket over here. Rabbi Meir says, "Af hushav lemashi yichziku avotav." No, he would go, because you didn't finish the pasuk. Says Rabbi Meir to Rabbi Yehuda. The pasuk finishes, El achuzat avotav ka'avotav. When he goes back to the inheritance of his parents, is ke'avotav. He will become exactly like his father. So if his father had a position, he will inherit that greatness as well. Vechen bagole. And says the Gemara, from there we learn about the person, the guy that went to Arei Miklat, went to Galut, that when he goes back, Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda disagree whether or not he goes back to his greatness or not. Right? So says the Gemara, Kshomer Yashuv Lerabot. What's the connection of a Gole, a person that goes to Galut, and an Eved Ivri? So says the Gemara like this. Kshomer Yashuv, when it says Yashuv by Eved, is coming to add the person that goes to Arei Miklat. Why? Because the word Yashuv is extra. Listen to what the pasuk says, right? It says Veshav el achuzato ve'el mishpachto ve'el achuzat avotav. That would have been sufficient, and he will return to his mishpacha and to the inheritance of his parents, his forefathers. That would be sufficient. At the end, he says again Yashuv. Meaning the full pasuk is Veshav el mishpachto ve'el achuzat avotav Yashuv. That Yashuv at the end is completely superfluous. So why do you have it? Says the Gemara, that is coming to teach you not by Evet Ivri because you don't need it, but by Galut, by a person that goes to Arei Miklat, that he too will go back to his greatness, or he won't, based on the machloket that we just studied, Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Meir. Now what's the connection? How do you see Arei Miklat from Eved Ivri. So it says the Gemara like this. Kedatanya, Yashuv harotzeach et eres achuzato. When the pasuk says Yashuv harotzeach et eres achuzato, that the rotzeach goes back to his land, to his own city, le'eres achuzato hushav, he goes back to his city, ve'eno shav lema she'achziku avotav, but he does not hold the greatness that he had before, or his fathers had before. Divrei Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Meir Omer av hushav lema she'achziku avotav. Rabbi Meir says no, he does go back. And where do you see it? Where do you know it? Says Rabbi Meir, Kamar Shiva Shiva Ma'atam. Over here it says Yashuv, the word, the verbiage for a Rotzeach B'Shogeg in Arei Miklat is Yashuv El Achuzato. Where else in the Torah you have the same exact word? By an Eved Ivri, you have an extra Yashuv, same word. Right? It says Shav El Mishpachto Ve'el Achuzat Avotav Yashuv, same exact word, and therefore you learn Yashuv, and you learn from there that he does go back to his city, and he goes back also to holding the positions that he held before, or his fathers would leave for him. That's the Rabbi Meir, and of course Rabbi Yehuda disagrees with that, as we learn. So that really concludes Perek Elu El HaGolin, Hadran Alach Elu El HaGolin, the second parak of this Masechta. Of course, there's a lot to be discussed about the Perek Elu HaGolin. Really one very interesting, Rabbi Simcha, he writes that in the time of Moshe Rabbeinu, we spoke about the fact that La'atid Lavo, we're going to have 3 extra Arei Miklat, but he says, even though that Arei Miklat, the cities of refuge, did not act as Arei Miklat in the life of Moshe Rabbeinu, until you went to Eretz Yisrael, you finished the conquest and the division of Eretz Yisrael. But it says the concept of Arei Miklat existed. In the whole 40 years of the Midbar, if someone accidentally killed somebody, they would go to the Machane Levia, where the Levim used to camp. Right? The 3 segments of the travels of Klal Yisrael in the Midbar. It was Machane Shechina, that was where the Aron, where the Mishkan was. Around it camped the Leviim, and around that camped the regular Shvatim. Right? Of course, the 4 different segments, the Galim. But that's how the structure was. And if someone accidentally killed someone, he would not live with his family. He would live, says Rabbi Simcha, with the Leviim for until the Kohen Gadol dies. And says Rabbi Simcha, but nobody in the 40 years killed anyone accidentally. How do I know? It's a genius, Rabbi Simcha. It says, because when Aaron HaKohen was the Kohen Gadol for the whole 40 years, dies, it says, every single person in Klal Yisrael cried for him. It says, if you would be going back home because of the death of Aaron HaKohen, you would be saying a bracha. Well, one could argue and say, well, someone that his father dies, also he makes Atov Ametiv when he has millions of dollars in Yerusha, but he's still also making Baruch Ta'ena Emet and he's crying. So one, you could, in parentheses, you could dingzach, you could say what you want to say, but nevertheless, he says, you see from here that everybody was completely sad, he was devastated when he passed away, and that shows that he did his job properly. We said before that the Kohen Gadol, is part of his duty is to daven that people should not come to this type of situation, and if he would do his job properly, these types of scenarios would not have happened, right? And therefore, that actually is a showcase of the greatness of Aaron HaKohen, that no one in the time of the 40 years of Aaron HaKohen's Kehuna Gedolah actually ended up killing someone b'shogeg, and that's again a showcase of Aaron Cohen's greatness. There's much to talk about this. B'ezrat Hashem, maybe we'll have another little piece before we start the third perek. The third and final perek of Masechet Makkot is the real Masechet Makkot, because we have been on tangent until now. The last two prakim are literally a tangent into getting actually to the topic of Malkut, which is Eluhen Halokin. These are the people who actually get Malkut, get Makot, which is B'ezrat Hashem, the topic that we're going to start in the next year. Zaku Baruch.